Howdy, my totally tubular games. We're back with another video. How do I get the Pooh Bear? Pooh Bear? Is that Pooh Bear? Well, today we're going to be doing something a little different. Today we're going to be talking about the game Retrace the Light. But before we begin, I do want to give a shout out to Xiaoming Game and Vonzo Media for sponsoring today's video. Thank you very much, y'all. I really do appreciate it. And so you might be going, what exactly is Retrace the Light? Is it out yet? No, it's releasing this November. But I sat down and played through the demo. That is publicly available on Steam, I might add, and after about an hour and a half of playtime, I thought I would share my thoughts on said demo. And I know what you might be thinking. You might even have typed it out already. You might be going, oh god, he's sponsored by this game, he's probably going to glaze the hell out of the demo. Well, genuinely, I always try to keep things 100 with you all, and I try to always share my unfiltered thoughts, and I'm going to do so here. There were some things I liked about the demo, and there were some things I didn't like about the demo, but overall, I am feeling pretty optimistic about this one, and it's one that I would like to check out in the future because there was a lot of good things about this demo. So let's get started. So when it comes to this game's story or narrative, it's a bit more complex than you might expect. There's a few different characters talking, at least in the demo, but when it comes to the actual story, it sees you playing as Enforcer Deckham, who is tasked with repairing bizarre mirror mazes stemming from human minds. The premise is certainly interesting. I'm curious to see just how deep into the human minds this game can go, and I'm at least somewhat curious to see what other characters show up. What we have on offer here seems intriguing enough, and I'm sure it's only going to get more and more interesting. But let's actually talk about the game. So the game is a 2.5D action-adventure title that very much reminds me of older Zelda games, like A Link to the Past, Link's Awakening, etc. It also reminds me of Tunic, which was also inspired by those types of games. But it also feels like this isn't the only inspiration for this game. It feels like there's a few different games. I mean, there's some Dark Souls elements, of course, and various other puzzle games. But what makes this game unique? Well, what makes it unique is the spatial retrace mechanism, or as the game tells you, the ability of retrace, which allows you to teleport back to previously visited locations. You just hold a button down and then press another button and you can teleport back to it. And at first I was like, oh, this seems like a cool little gimmick, but how much could you really get out of this? Like, it doesn't seem like the most complex gimmick. Well, I can tell you from this demo, at the very least, that the game actually gets very creative with this. And it comes up with a number of interesting puzzles and encounters that utilize this technique. So what does the core moment-to-moment gameplay really look like? It sees you navigating through these mazes, solving puzzles, and then confronting these powerful enemies. I can tell you from the demo I played, it's very linear. It sees you going from point A to B, occasionally collecting something and using it somewhere else, solving these puzzles with your retrace ability, and then of course, everyone and their mom is going to try to stop you. I will say these robots that show up in these mazes very much do remind me of Nier Automatopoeia. But hey, I love all the Nier games, so it certainly made me smile. When it comes to the puzzles themselves, there's nothing too terribly complex here. I figured everything out in less than a minute or two, and it very much feels like they're just scratching the surface when it comes to puzzles and this ability. I'm sure later in the full game it gets wildly complex with numerous different variables, and genuinely I am curious to see where they go with this because everything seemed pretty simple. And it felt like once you knew the solution to one of them, you knew the solution to all of them. So I genuinely am wondering what they're going to do to mix things up, at least in terms of the puzzles. When it comes to the combat, it's actually pretty decent here. It's also rather challenging, surprisingly so, especially for a demo. There's just a normal swipe and then there's a bigger swipe, and later you get the ability to do this big thrust, and the combat actually feels pretty decent. It's got a bit of weight to it. The enemies react, and there's actually this nice crunch behind everything. The sound design in general is really solid in this game. More on the music in a second, but the combat is more than passable here, and I was actually having a bit of fun with it. The retrace ability makes things a lot more interesting as well. Obviously, you can activate the retrace to go back a few steps to try to get the jump or drop on an enemy, but if they're about to do a giant attack on you, you can just totally reverse that shit and just yeet away from them. You can even counter them if you do it at the right time, and there were plenty of satisfying moments here. While the standard enemies in this demo don't really put up all that much of a fight, there are two bosses that are present here, and the first one didn't really challenge me too much, but the second one, holy moly, this is like the hardest boss I have ever fought in a demo for a video game. My jaw was on the floor. On the floor, I tell you. I was just fucking flabbergasted with how difficult they made the second boss, and I'd say a third, almost half of my playtime was spent just fighting this boss. Like, he does a shit ton of damage, he has some very big attacks, it's not super obvious what he's going to do, and he just takes a lot of abuse. But once I finally beat him, I was pretty proud of myself. It seems like a well-designed fight, I just don't think that it should be this early in the game. I don't think it should be in the demo, and so if I could give any feedback or share a negative that I think can easily be improved, maybe make the boss a little easier. It doesn't have to be necessarily easier in the main game, that's the main game, but for the demo, man, the demo should not be this difficult. I died way too many times to this boss. It really tested my abilities, and it asked me, do you know how this retrace mechanic works? And I guess I didn't, but now I certainly do because I beat this frickin' thing. But anyway, outside of the combat and outside of the puzzle solving, there is a little bit of exploration here. You can go off the beaten path to find this little collectible, and you get to obtain some of the game's in-game currency. There's also these modules that allow you to customize your playstyle. I didn't really get much of a chance to try these out in the demo, but apparently there'll be 7 different modules, and each one brings its own unique playstyle and variation where you can focus on like counterattacks or just raw power or even charged attacks. This would certainly mix things up, and it would probably make that boss a little easier, or at the very least it would give you some different approaches, and hey, nothing wrong with that. Options is always good. But that's not it for the combat. You also have this little ally that helps you out doing a little bit of damage here and there. I appreciated all the help I could get for that freaking boss, man. I'm still reeling over that boss. But it's okay, it can't hurt me anymore. Unless I go and play the full game where I'm certain it's there and it's just as difficult. Apparently you'll get to make choices in the full game as well, and there'll be multiple endings. I'm curious to see how this works, as I don't believe I was presented with any choices here. The last thing that I want to touch on here is the game's overall presentation. This is obviously a much smaller budget indie title, so I'm not going to be too harsh here, but I think the game has a nice little art style to it. It's got a cool little aesthetic to it. It's very soft. It's also bright, and there's a lot of fun colors. I always can appreciate that look. I love my dark browns, grays, and blacks as much as the next guy, but I also love color in my games, and I think it's got a nice color palette. It ran really well on my computer, and it did seem well optimized, at least for a demo, so I got no problems there. When it comes to the music, it was actually pretty good as well, like surprisingly good. When it was chill and calm, it was actually incredibly peaceful, and then when things heated up, the music also did, and it was actually pretty catchy. It was maybe my biggest takeaway from the entire game, and that's no slight on the game itself, it's just the music, yeah, it really slapped. So overall, I did enjoy the demo for Retrace the Light. The demo took me about an hour and a half to complete, but like 30 minutes, maybe about 45 minutes, really was spent fighting this boss over and over. It felt like I was banging my head against the wall, but I really did understand the game's mechanics by the end of it, so there's absolutely that. The game, I imagine, will be quite a bit longer than this demo. I'm not sure how much it's going to cost, but I imagine it's going to have several more hours, many more puzzles, and a bunch of different bosses. Apparently there's going to be some replayability, and again, this is an indie game. This is not no big AAA game where it's going to be 20, 30, 40 hours with different endings allowing you to put over 100 hours into it. No, this seems like a much smaller production, and there's nothing wrong with that. I like my indie games as well. I don't play as many as I should, but I'm glad I played this one. I really actually did enjoy my time with it. It does provide something a little different, and the music, like I said, the music actually slaps. Am I going to be coming back to this demo over and over and over? No, I don't come back to any demo over and over. I usually play a demo, think, wow, this really sucks, I don't want to check it out, or this was pretty good, I think I'll check it out. Retrace the Light? It's certainly in the latter of those two. I'll be very curious when it comes out. To my understanding, it's actually been in development for quite a while, and I'm glad that it's finally releasing. It certainly wasn't on my radar before, but it absolutely is on my radar now, and I'm glad that I got to try it. Again, you can go play the demo on Steam if you're curious for yourself. You might be surprised with how much you enjoy this one. Maybe not. Either way, when you get to that boss, you can either overcome the challenge or you can stop right there. Either way, you're getting a fair amount of time out of this demo. So thanks again for the sponsorship. I really do appreciate it. It's going to help me out for sure. And yeah, that's it for today. So hope you all have a good one. Stay safe, y'all. Bye-bye.